From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And coming up today, K-State's A.J. Tarpoff will discuss the cow herd health concerns that linger as feeding and housing conditions remain cold and wet. He talks in particular about newborn calf scours and coccidiosis concerns and what you producers can do to lessen those threats. Also, highlights from this week's Cattle Chat podcast out of the Beef Cattle Institute at K-State. Brad White and Bob Larson are joined by the American Royals' Jackie McClaskey. They'll look at the new American Royal Facility project taking shape, and they'll share thoughts on encouraging rural youth to pursue careers in agriculture. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Jared Hoyle talks about the prospects of winter damage to home lawns. Here on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Thanks for tuning in to Agriculture Today. Out across the Kansas countryside, it is one of the more predominant matters of interest for cattle producers right now, and that is the slop that you producers are having to manage your herds through. What with the snowy winter and now persistent rains, this has created all manner of health issues for the herd. We're talking now with K-State beef veterinarian A.J. Tarpoff, who has been interacting with cow-calf producers in particular and trying to lend some insight on what can be done in these conditions. And frankly, AJ, we'll talk of some things that producers need to think about and maybe respond with, but the solutions here are spare. Let's put it that way.
We haven't had a break. Okay, things have been very, very tough this year. And if you're getting run down, if you're thinking that, this is a really rough year, you're not alone. Everybody's going through the same type of issues. We've had hypothermic calves. We've had the freezing temperatures, the high winds. All of a sudden, the temperature has warmed up a bit. We have a fully saturated soil, and now we're getting rain. So what does that lead to? Mud season. And we're right in the middle of it right now.
It is abundant. It is compounding management of our cow-calf herds, and producers have encountered a wide assortment of, shall we call them, climate-driven calving time issues.
We've had the cold, non-suckling calves that we've been managing, trying to get warmed up, get back on the cow, supplementing colostrum, which is, some of the best management that we can do. But now we're running into scours issues. Being born into muddy environments lends the issues with muddy teats. Okay, we have manure-contaminated teats that for the first suckle, that calf gets up and tries to nurse colostrum, inadvertently takes in some of the environmental pathogens that are in that environment due to the mud and contamination. We've had these cows grouped up and have easy access. We can supplement them. We can feed them. We can keep a close eye on them during calving. However, those areas have become very contaminated just from the normal manure pathogens that are circulating through the herd. Those are the pathogens that are actually causing our scour issues.
So preventing the scours outbreak may be problematic because one can't really escape those muddy conditions totally. So what's the responsive choice here?
The responsive choice is close management of our animals, okay? If we need to intervene, if we have weak calves, the number one thing we need to get into those newborn calves to increase health and get some protection is colostrum, right. Okay? So closely monitoring suckling activity and things of that nature is critical. It's easy to sit here and say we need to get these cows to calve in cleaner environments. No area is spotless right now. And so take that with a grain of salt, but we can do some things to help move these cows through some of these calving pastures to make sure that we can limit the exposure that they're getting. Think about our high traffic areas, okay, where they eat, where they lay down, and where they go to water. Okay, those are our three main, really high traffic areas. Can we move our feeding areas? Can we feed in a well-drained, higher elevation within that pasture? Okay, so we can roll out some of those hays. We can feed in different locations so we're not building up and stomping through kind of the topsoil to really end up with some deep ruts. Where we feed, where we bed. Okay, bedding is still a phenomenal resource right now to increase our cow comfort, to give a nice, dry, packed, bedded area for these animals to lay down, cow and calf alike. Picking and moving these bedding areas through the pasture can also help reduce some of that environmental contamination during calving.
It's something of an offshoot of the rotational calving system we've spoken of before, but after the fact, in effect.
It is, because right now, a lot of ranchers right now are limited on what pastures they can actually get into. If we need to be supplementing with hay, if we're doing any other type of supplementation program, we can't get to all our pastures right now. Even with a four-wheel drive tractor, it's very difficult to get to some of these locations. So moving cattle and things of that nature are very low on the list just because we can't feasibly do it right now. How do we best manage what we have right in front of us right now? And that's where rotating, moving feeding areas, making sure that they have easy access to water. If around our water tanks are getting really stomped out with mud, going in with some type of hardened packed soil, maybe some rock just around the water troughs to make sure that they have easy access to it. Try to increase some of that comfort and really doing the best that we can.
For those calves, scours, as you say, AJ, a real threat out there. That's not the only pathogen that you are concerned about. You bring up coccidiosis as a potential trouble as well.
I do. So with our regular early life scour pathogens, it's the first few weeks of life we run into most of the issues. Our environmental pathogens, first few days, we have some viruses and some other protozoa we can run into out to a few weeks of age. And typically we think, hey, once they get to a month of age, we're in the clear. However, with these very wet, muddy areas, if cattle are going to be eating off the ground, if they're going to be eating hay, supplement, things of that nature, some cake or cubes that you put out, I also worry about contamination with coccidiosis. That's where we can get some bloody diarrhea. It actually interacts with the lower part of the bowel, and we can see some pretty high levels within a lot of animals in a relatively small area, and especially if they're eating off the ground, we can run into some of those cocci issues in some of these calves for a longer period of time, and that's kind of one of my concerns right now.
So can a producer do anything by way of a vaccination protocol or what have you to try to avert coccidiosis?
No, we don't have a vaccine or anything like that for coccidiosis. We do have treatments that we can supplement through mineral supplement, things of that nature, that we can try to limit the effect of some of these coccidia organisms. But the other thing is, if we are going to be feeding a supplement, such as dry distillers or things of that nature, trying to feed it off the ground. And I'm sure a lot of our producers have seen these portable troughs that you can kind of pull through the pasture on the back of the tractor. Just getting that supplement off the ground can reduce the spread and exposure. We won't see any clinical signs of cocci issues in our cows, but they do carry it, they do harbor it, and they do spread it. So how we feed, and if we can somehow get that feed off the ground, especially if we're going to be feeding in one location for any length of time, if we don't have the opportunity to rotate around an area, trying to get that feed off the ground can really go a long way.
Any other pathogens that could rise as a possible concern here?
Yes. Muddy conditions always lead to foot issues, lameness issues, things of that nature. Foot rot, that's an absolute concern coming into the spring. And with the muddy conditions, we've got soft skin, soft hide in between the hooves, and stomping through mud, all it takes is one small abrasion to really have a pretty gnarly infection going through that hoof. So yes, I worry about foot rot. I also worry about just the overall amount of stress that some of our calves are having, running into pneumonia issues. Okay, so an elevated risk of pneumonia just due to the stress, the mud, the increase in nutrient demand from dealing with all this mud. These are all things to consider.
And be watchful for. Those could manifest themselves here in the weeks ahead.
Absolutely, especially just the stress. Yes, we're getting warmer temperatures, but we have wet. Mud is anti-thermal, okay, right, if that makes sense. So it robs our animals of heat. And so if we get cold, we get wind, we have wet animals already, that increases stress, okay, increases nutrient demand, and increases the risk of running into some of our respiratory pneumonia type issues.
So loads of things producers to be alert for. And one final thing here, cow maintenance and nutrition, not only nursing the calves, but eventually heading into the spring breeding season.
Yes, that's very heavily on my mind right now. We have cows that are stomping through pretty wet conditions. That can increase their maintenance demand by 30%. Okay, they need 30% more calories per day just to maintain weight. We throw on top of that some of our cows have already calved. They're about ready to hit peak lactation and milk production. Okay, that's an enormous amount of calories going into producing and growing that young calf. Well, we still need to supplement and feed our cows appropriately to make sure that they are maintaining their body condition, because reproduction is kind of an afterthought. Okay, the body always takes care of itself first before it wants to reproduce. We don't want our cows to get too skinny going into breeding season here in the spring. We want to maintain the body weight that hopefully we've held through the winter. So supplementing and feeding them, we're not going to be able to put too much weight on these cows right now just due to the very high energy demand that they're going through right now. So feeding, supplementing appropriately, trying to maintain body weight, getting ready for spring breeding season. Start thinking about that now.
And one final thing, AJ, lessons learned from these conditions the last several weeks with the snow and now the resulting muck that's out there, things that producers could do in advance of this happening again.
Well, one big thing with the environmental extremes that we've dealt with this year is we've exposed some of our weaknesses on our own operations, okay? We know where mud builds up. We know where we don't have very good drainage. We know where, boy, it'd be great if we could have a windbreak or some type of wind protection in this location of the pasture. So, use what we've learned and what we've battled through this year to help make a change with that. Okay, if we need to do some dirt work in some of our dry lot locations, if we need to build mounds, if we need to increase drainage in certain areas, coming here into the spring, once it starts to dry up a little bit, making notes and actually putting an emphasis to, increase our infrastructure to make sure we're better prepared for the next time this may occur. And it may not be for a couple of years, but at least we're better prepared then than we were this year.
It's been a struggle for a number of our cattle producers out there, so things to contemplate moving forward. And AJ, always appreciate the input.
A pleasure to be here.
Beef veterinarian AJ Tarpoff of K-State Research and Extension once more. Some of the things for you cow-calf producers to contemplate as we're coming out of adverse weather conditions and hopefully turning the corner into better spring conditions here quite soon. And we'll be back here on the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. For you now, excerpts from another Cattle Chat podcast out of the Beef Cattle Institute at K-State. The team of researchers at the Institute gather each week to take on various topics of relevance to the beef cattle sector. Veterinarians Bob Larson and Brad White are at the microphones this time. They're accompanied by a special guest, as introduced by Brad.
We're happy to have Jackie McClaskey here with us. She has served for a long time as the Secretary of Agriculture in Kansas, and now you're in a new role, and you're the president of the Future American Royal Campus. Tell us, Bob and I were just talking a little bit ago, and Bob, you had some memories of the Royal.
Oh, you bet. We went as a family to visit the Royal, and then when I was a little bit older, we took cattle there and showed in the show. And I think about not only the American Royal, but there's other livestock shows, the Denver show, Fort Worth, Louisville. And my memory of those is very positive, and an important role of bringing some ag into some urban environments. But I'd be really interested in Jackie's perspective on, how do we build on that foundation? What is the real value of some of these, not only just the livestock show, but the American Royal as a bigger entity?
Well, first of all, I think most of the folks listening probably have a good American Royal experience, just like you said, and it's a tradition that started in 1899. So as we look at the future of the American Royal, the last thing we want to do is move away from that tradition. I've told many people if in a perfect world we'd be able to expand and renovate the American Royal at its current site just because of the history and tradition, but that's not of interest to the folks in that area, and it's not an option. So we're looking at a whole brand new campus that's going to allow us to build on that livestock show and that rodeo and that equine tradition. I've personally believed so much in the livestock show tradition, the work ethic, the experience that those young people get. And when they come together and meet other young people from all across the country, it's just an experience you can't replicate in any other youth experience. So we want to find a way to continue to grow that and expand that.
And people come from all across the country, as you mentioned, to go to that show. Do you know how many people come in a year?
There are over 200,000 people who come to the Royal for different activities during a year, whether that includes the livestock show, the horse show, and of course the biggest event that the American Royal currently does, which is the barbecue. So over half those people come for that one single 3-day event where you have folks from almost every state and usually 15 to 20 countries participating in that event.
In the barbecue event.
In the barbecue event.
Now, you said the new campus, and you talked about a new campus. Tell us a little bit about that, because that sounds like more than just an arena.
It is, in fact, more than just an arena. It's more than just buildings in general. The American Royal campus will be located northwest of the Kansas Speedway, just west of the Legends area, and it will include approximately, at this point, 4 arenas, including an additional outdoor arena possibly, 300,000 square feet of what I call barn space. Everybody else wants to call exhibition space, climate controlled, solid floors, so we can use it for a number of different types of activities. And then in addition to that, an education center. And that education center will really focus on sharing the food and agricultural message with consumers and really looking for ways to expand that message to not just people that walk in the front door, but to people all across the country and across the globe.
Now, will that education center, because I think of the Royal, and correct me here, I think of the Royal as kind of a limited time event, right? It's a period of time where we have the Royal and then we don't the rest of the year. Is that the same plan going forward, or?
No, it is not. The American Royal currently, as you stated, is a 14-week event, and they don't own their facilities, so that's all they can do. Their 14 weeks are their 14 weeks. And they do great events throughout the year, like school tours, and they may host meetings and things at that site. But the American Royal branded events that we know are simply a good chunk of the fall, and then that's it. This facility will run 365 days a year, 52 weeks out of the year. It will be available for agricultural and food events, and the education center will run every day. So it will be also available. Let's say, for example, there's a basketball tournament that's using the American Royal Complex. There's still going to be then, for every young person who walks in that building there to play basketball and their parents and grandparents who come to watch them, they are going to be surrounded by the food and agricultural message at every corner. The education center is not going to be a standalone building. It's actually going to be integrated into all of the other facilities. So if you're walking through the barns or you're walking through the arenas, you're going to be surrounded by that messaging that we think is so important to get to consumers.
There's a website, and we'll put it in the show notes if people are interested in more information or some of the stuff, because that's exciting that it's going to be going year-round and lots of opportunities right there in the Kansas City area. One of the things that I know you're passionate about and have done a lot of work with is getting youth involved in ag. So 4-H, FFA, what are some of the things that you see that we could be doing to not only get people involved, but maybe keep them involved?
We're very lucky in Kansas to have a very solid foundation, and with both Kansas 4-H and Kansas FFA, both whose numbers are growing, both have continued to grow, and I think there's probably other states where that hasn't occurred. So we don't seem to have a problem of getting folks engaged at those young people opportunities. It's how do we keep them, as you were just saying, contributing to agriculture for a career. And I think that's an area where we have to continue to look for opportunities to really engage young people in all different types of agriculture so they learn more than maybe just what they did growing up. Or if they came from a non-farm background, they're exposed to the breadth of agriculture. We don't want them to just know one piece. We need to make sure they're learning about different sectors so we can hopefully help them find a place where they'll fit.
And there's some cool stuff that as we think about technology or some of the other areas, but you may have to branch out from beyond what you grew up knowing. And Bob and I both teach vet students, and some of the vet students come from an area where they've got a lot of experience, which is always a good thing.
To me, everything is a double-edged sword, really, in that one of the things that I appreciate about our students that come with a lot of animal agriculture background is, of course, it's just some of the just comfort and knowing what normal looks like and knowing how to work around livestock. But one of the things that my students that don't have as much animal ag background is they bring fresh eyes. They just see things without a preconceived way of how things have always been, and really those are complementary skills. And so again, getting people with different backgrounds,
pairing those together, and whether it's ag or not, getting somebody to and you also learn a lot about something when you explain it to someone who maybe doesn't know as much about it.
That's exactly right. And you know, because of my job working with college students, but I'm also exposed. I've got children that are in FFA and 4-H. Through the junior high and high school years, and then you look at the ag programs at some of the community colleges. There's really a tremendous opportunity for students that are going to be directly in agriculture, kind of encouraging those students to go into those careers. But even the non-college of agriculture types of careers. I think I brought up a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to my cousin who works in Minnesota now, and the business he works with is a crop, high-tech crop, so some of the GPS things. And his complaint was, similar to ours, it's hard to find good employees. And what he really wanted was a computer engineer that also had an ag background. And he just struggled to find that person. And so I do wish we could get all of our kids growing up in rural areas that have an ag interest to at least consider some form of an agricultural career. And it may not be from a degree, from a junior college or four-year school in agriculture. It may be in engineering or food science or something else, but their role in agriculture is really important. And that farm background, that growing up with crops and livestock, is kind of that untrainable set of skills that a lot of people are looking for.
But that doesn't mean you couldn't go into ag if you didn't have that farm background. And you mentioned keeping people in ag. How do we do that, Jackie? What's the opportunity there?
I think the first step is really simple, and we often miss it, and that's asking them to stay in ag. I think that we have a responsibility, as we know young people, even in our own families, that are trying to figure out what they're going to do, telling them that the ag industry needs them. And if they're going to choose a path that isn't maybe more traditional ag, they're maybe going into healthcare, they're going into finance, or they're going into engineering, or whatever that might be, helping them identify ways they can still tied to agriculture and be a part of telling the food and agriculture story is also important. But the reality is we need young people to work in agriculture. We need talent at every corner of the agricultural industry. And not to jump back to the Royal, but that's one of the things that we're really trying to identify is how long-term can the American Royal really play in that talent recruitment for agriculture, and working with not only universities, but technical institutions, two-year schools, and the industry as a whole.
Yeah, in fact, I guess I'm biased, and I don't mind saying, but I do think that we have kids that grew up in agriculture, have that work ethic, the opportunity really to take a lot of responsibility early in life. And then you have some great youth development, leadership development organizations like 4-H and FFA. These kids have an opportunity to learn some speaking skills, some record-keeping skills. Those are the types of things that employers just gobbling up. They just die for those types of life experiences in addition to whatever training they've received. And so I think sometimes we do a great job of exposing kids to to really make them really valuable to our society, and then they kind of get away from ag.
But I think ask them to come back, and the other thing that I would add is give some ownership. And that doesn't mean necessarily ownership of the land or the cattle but project level ownership. This is yours. I want you to make it go. Give them some accountability. Can be a positive.
K-State's Brad White and Bob Larson, along with Jackie McClaskey, former Kansas Secretary of Agriculture, now president of the new American Royal. Hear the entire podcast at beefcattleInstitute.org. And you're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned into the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here as we continue on now with a look at today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. The Environmental Protection Agency has formally published its proposed rule allowing sales of E15 blended fuels to motorists all year long. Here's an update on that from the USDA's Rod Bain.
I'm looking forward to putting E15 in my car when we're rolling into the summer months again.
And Iowa corn farmer Kevin Ross, through the National Corn Growers Association and others, have led efforts to make E15 blended fuels available at the pumps, not just in the summer months, but all year round. And the latest step in that progress was announced this week by the Environmental Protection Agency, formal proposal of its year-round E15 rule. That means E15 would be sold without reed vapor pressure controls currently in place during the summer months. The goal remains having the rule formally adopted and year-round E15 available before the start of the 2019 summer driving season. But Ross says supporters of ethanol must continue to expand biofuel infrastructure and market availability to motorists.
Flat out, it's great to see it move forward, but to really make the impact to the market in the future, we're going to need more stations.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The proposed Economic Research Service relocation by the USDA were some of the issues raised with the USDA Office of Inspector General at a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing this week. The subcommittee was anxious to hear an update on a report into the rationale and the cost justification of realigning the ERS under the Chief Economist Office and relocating the ERS and the NIFA offices. The USDA's in-house watchdog has nearly completed the field investigation for its 2019 probe, according to USDA Inspector General Phyllis Fong. During the one-hour hearing, the next step, she says, is to start reaching out to stakeholders and drafting recommendations. The USDA this week published a new list of candidate locations for that move. Now, Representative Shelley Pingree of Maine, who opposes that change and has offered legislation to prevent it, said earlier this week that people want to know why this is going forward and floated a new issue for the OIG to explore at that hearing. The stakeholders allege that the reorganization is being pursued because the research was not aligned with the current administration on issues such as the SNAP program and climate change, according to Pingree. She asked whether the OIG was looking into those allegations. Fong said this was new information and currently not part of the scope of the study, but because OIG had not heard about this new allegation, the office would be interested, she says, in finding out more. Well, the beef industry continues to work to promote beef on food service menus in many different settings. Todd Domer tells us here about a recent local example of just such a productive partnership.
Students at Kansas State University were treated to a beefed-up dinner menu on Kansas Day back in late January. The Kansas Beef Council partnered with the Beef Cattle Institute and Dining Services at K-State to offer a larger portion beef burger patty to students eating at the three on-campus dining halls, Kramer, Derby, and Van Zyl. Students typically are offered 2-ounce beef burgers. This partnership allowed kitchens to serve 5.3-ounce burgers. In addition, numerous toppings were available, allowing students to build their perfect burger. The Beef Council also coordinated student volunteers from the K-State Collegiate Cattlemen's Club and K-State Meat Science Association to be on hand at each dining hall to answer questions on beef production, sustainability, and nutrition. Results from the event showed Kramer Dining Hall serving 450 burgers, representing 38% of total student diners. Derby served 650, which was 50% of total student diners, and Van Zyl served 192, comprising 92% of total student diners. Leading up to the burger promotion, the Kansas Beef Council and BCI conducted a Beef 101 for food preparation specialists, dietitians, and management on the K-State Dining Services team. These individuals involved in menu planning for thousands of meals a day got to do a taste comparison between grain-finished and grass-finished beef. They also heard speakers from K-State and the industry talk about the beef life cycle, how ranchers care for their cattle on a daily basis, and consumer-driven changes in beef. This is an example of how checkoff dollars are used to help promote beef on the menu with food service partners including restaurants, hospitals, and schools. I'm Todd Domer.
Now with the Kansas soybean update, here's Greg Akagi.
Keith Tapp joins us. He is a soybean producer from Kentucky and serves on the executive committee of the United Soybean Board.
Keith, USB is working side by side with the American Soybean Association and U.S. Soybean Export Council, really looking at what we see demand-wise, but what we see out there is potential future markets for U.S. soybeans.
As you know, the Soybean Board is responsible for the investments that the farmers check off of their beans, and we do that by research in the markets that are developed through that and through the products that we come up with, and then trying to develop markets in other nations or other countries. Okay, so we get a project together. We get a new use. We need someone to help get that implemented. That's where the American Soybean Association comes in. They can go and lobby for this for whatever registration needs. We cannot do that with our checkoff funds. So they do their work, and then we have USEC, the United Soybean Export Council, that they're online to help us get that market share in other countries, and they do a great job, boots on the ground there, which allows us to do what we do. ASA does what they do. We work great together as a team, as a soy family, and trying to get markets developed and then get markets moved and better serve the soybean industry.
And it's always a constant state of work to develop the markets you are currently in, but to find those new markets too.
And that's one thing in February we decided as a board and Soybean Board, we always look at new markets, but we're looking at more of a basic market share that no one's tapped into. The economics may not be there for them to produce a lot of soy. They may be more interested in our soy foods, our tofus, our tempeh, and stuff like that. And then hopefully we'll have our foot in the door when they get economically sound, that they will want to further buy our product. And we've got a good quality product. When our meal, that we do a lot of export of that into markets now. So that's where we're trying to build demand.
Especially to feed animals protein-wise, to be able to do that. It's such a great product to be able for those countries to be able to use.
Absolutely. And that's, we're trying to help them, and in turn that will help us.
And those were the comments of Keith Tapp, who is a Kentucky soybean producer. He also serves on the United Soybean Board's executive committee, and he joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. And this is Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Now for you on Agriculture Today, our weekly horticulture segment. Yes, we're finally edging into true spring weather, so it's a good time to start talking about home turfgrass management. Research and Extension turfgrass specialist Jared Hoyle, K-State Research and Extension, is back with us after a winter hiatus. Good to have you along with us once again, Jared. And speaking of winter, because of the harshness of this past winter, you're getting questions now about whether or not some turfgrass may have taken a winter kill hit.
That is correct. Every year that you have a harder winter or even just visual snowfall, it seems colder than the average years. The questions start pouring in, is my turf going to survive? And to be honest with you, I don't know. But there are a couple indicators or different things if you go out and look that maybe you can identify to know if there'll be more or less survival or not. So you get winter kill for a couple different reasons. One, just direct low temperature. When it gets super, super cold outside, it can just freeze the plant and kill it. If you have ice conditions, so say we had a lot of snow, it melted, and then it made a layer of ice. And if you have that for a long period of time, that makes some conditions that turf doesn't like to grow. And then you can get disease under type of that, snow mold or whatnot. But we don't typically see those conditions as much here. That's more north. But we do see what's called desiccation or crown dehydration. So what the plant does, turf grows from the crown, that little growing point on the soil surface, and the leaves can dry out and still be fine over the winter, with wind and lack of moisture. But if that crown dries out, then it could kill the plant. But with our winter that we've had quite a bit of snow cover. And that in those areas, it does act like a blanket. And when it does melt, it does hydrate the crown. And we've even had some rainfalls. And that's why I'm not as concerned with the winter kill, because I feel like we've had enough moisture throughout the winter to keep that crown hydrated. But there are some things to think about when it does come to winter injury. So crown hydration, that's great, but areas that are maybe on top of a hill that have been exposed to more wind, maybe the snow blew off of it, those are going to be areas that might dry out faster and may have more winter injury. Shady areas, just the temperature just stayed colder, the ground stayed frozen a little bit longer, those can be affected, more likely to have winter injury. And in sandier soils, because they just dry out faster, those areas typically can have more winter injury as well. And then just the fact that newly seeded lawns in the fall, my lawn was seeded way too late, so I have zero expectations that it will actually survive because it barely got up and then it froze, I think, the next day. But newly seeded lawns are going to be more susceptible to winter injury, as well as warm season grasses like buffalo grass, zoysia grass, and Bermuda grass. But zoysia, buffalo, and Bermuda do have stolons and rhizomes, so if you do have patches, it will grow back in, unlike the fescues and whatnot that if it dies, you probably have to reseed.
And, of course, that is the remedy if one does have an issue. Reseeding is the option there. But the general story here is that winter kill may be minimal.
Yes, and it can vary from front yard to backyard, from neighbor to neighbor. It is very spotty. I see it more on golf courses because of the lower, tighter cut turf, sometimes with exposed greens and hills and banks. And we may have more than I think. But with the amount of moisture we had this winter, I feel like we will be okay, even though we did have some cold temperatures.
Just a quick aside on this, Jared. We've had moisture for sure, and in fact, we've had ponding water because of drainage issues in any number of lawns out there. So if these conditions persist, will there be a potential issue with drowning that turf out?
Yes, with any time, it's like we preach over the summer, do not overwater, because that water will fill the air spaces in the soil as well. And then becomes anaerobic, and you can't have gas exchange. In the springtime, that could be an issue because in some areas the grounds may still be frozen, so that water may not be able to penetrate. But as the temperatures do warm up, the water does hold heat very well. And so as the heat can move through that water and thaw that soil out, hopefully then once it gets through that frost layer, the water will be able to move. If you do have areas with standing water, there's not much you could do except wait until let it dry out, but know that might be an area for renovation in the future.
Right, exactly. Deal with the drainage at some point.
Yep.
And, of course, we're not completely away from winter conditions yet. It has warmed up recently, but late frost could ding lawns as well, could it not?
That's right. So right now it's about the time, if you look at the extended forecast here for Manhattan, finally getting warmer temperatures during the daytime, but we still are getting cooler temperatures, at night, getting down close to the freezing or just above freezing. And those are the conditions that produce frost, which is, just ice crystals right on the turf. If you walk across it, what happens is those ice crystals, they act like knives and they poke holes in the cells of the plants, and the plant doesn't die, but it does injure it, so you'll have brown footprints. So if you minimize traffic on it, then you're going to minimize that browning or that damage. But the good thing is, this is springtime, where we are going to be warming up, so that plant does have time to recover, whereas frost, in the fall, it just stayed brown all wintertime because it didn't have the environment to warm up. So it's just kind of a, I call it a small public service announcement, don't walk on the grass type of thing.
Lastly here, and we're still a few weeks from real intense lawn management for the spring, but there are a few things that you say homeowners can do to ready for that.
That's right. So in the springtime, we really are ramping up for cool season lawns, tall fescue especially. And so we preach fall fertilization, trying not to, do too much spring fertilization. So really trying to avoid that as much as possible. If you have to fertilize, that would be something you may once it greens up and comes out of the winter dormancy. March is a good time to spray for your broadleaf weeds. If you had any escapes from the fall is the best time to do it, but try to go ahead and knock those back. And if it does dry out and you do have these compacted areas, go ahead and try and aerify and core and relieve those. You can core, aerify, remove the plugs, leave them there. You can spike. You don't necessarily have to reseed. Most of those aerifiers are not as invasive, so you can go right over the lawn and be perfectly fine.
So just a handful of things to think about here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But we plan to have you back in the month of April, for that's when the lawn care tasks really ramp up. Until then, many thanks, Jared, for coming over.
Thank you.
Jared Hoyle, turfgrass horticulturist with K-State Research and Extension, our guest on this week's horticulture segment. And that'll do it for our Thursday edition. As always, thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.